Welcome to the Stories Behind the Science, an intimate conversation series with the authors of the Academic Medicine Supplement on Disability Inclusion in Undergraduate Medical Education. In each episode, we step beyond the printed page. You'll hear directly from the authors, their motivations, the lived experiences, and data that shape their scholarship, and the futures they imagine for a more inclusive profession. These aren't just studies or commentaries, they are stories of systemic change and of a deep commitment to justice in medicine. Together, we'll explore the supplement's 6 themes: the evolving landscape of disability inclusion, the learning environment, disability at the intersections, barriers to entry and transition, new frontiers in disability research, and real-world case studies of inclusion in action. Through these conversations, you'll meet the people behind the work, their stories, their vision, and the communities that drive their scholarship. So join us as we uncover the stories behind the science, stories that are reshaping medical education and, ultimately, the future of healthcare. I'm your host, Lisa Meeks, and I'm delighted to welcome today's guests, Dr. Zoie Sheets, resident physician in the Departments of Medicine and Pediatrics at the University of Chicago, and Dr. Nalinda Charnsangavej, associate professor of pediatrics and residency program director at the Dell Medical School at the University of Texas at Austin. In this episode, we'll explore their article, Preparing to Thrive, Supporting Learners with Disabilities Through the Undergraduate-to-Graduate Medical Education Transition. Drawing on both research and lived experience, the team identifies 4 critical areas where disabled learners need greater support: disclosure decisions, specialty selection, program selection, and requesting and utilizing accommodations in residency. We'll discuss why these transition points matter, the challenges learners often face, and how thoughtful, coordinated strategies from both UME and GME can help ensure that disabled medical students are not only able to survive this critical transition, but truly thrive.
My name's Zoie Sheets, and I'm an internal medicine and pediatrics resident at the University of Chicago, as well as a member of the Docs with Disabilities initiative and a disabled doctor myself.
My name is Nalinda Charnsangavej. I am a pediatrician. I'm the pediatric residency program director at the University of Texas at Austin, Dell Medical School.
I'm so excited. I know you so well and work with you so closely that my efforts to make these stories behind the science more like a conversation should be effortless today. You're both just so great. I'm excited to hear the story behind the science of this paper. So, what inspired you to pursue this line of inquiry? Was there a personal or professional story that motivated the work?
Thanks for that question, Lisa. I've been engaged in disability-related medical education research since before I started medical school, which you are well aware of. And a lot of that was fueled by a desire to make medical education more accessible for people with disabilities, people like me. Not only do I think that med ed should be accessible simply because I think disabled people deserve to pursue whatever career they feel is a good fit for them and interests them, but I also believe that having more disabled doctors can really transform medical education and practice. There are a lot of facets of disability culture, too, like flexibility, a commitment to communal care, respect for all bodies in all forms, desire for interdependence, that if we were weaving them into medicine, could really promote wellness for everyone interacting with this field. And so when the time came for me to transition to medical school, the research took on an entirely new meaning for me. I was experiencing firsthand the assumptions, barriers, and exclusion I had read and written about. Luckily, I also had resources like the Docs with Disabilities podcast, my mentors, including both of you, quite a bit of literature, student-led groups like MSDCI that helped me figure things out, until residency applications. And this is when things felt like much more of a black box. There was so much less guidance. And in an already terrifying time, this made me feel really lost. I wasn't sure if being disabled would impact my chance of matching, if I should even discuss it in my application, how it might come up in interviews, or even what my rights were as a resident, what I could have access to. It's a weird state of half employee, half learner when you transition. And so this work was really aimed at starting to fill this gap, to give learners and institutions an idea of how can you support this scary transition period.
It's actually one of the things that comes up the most when people reach out to me by email from the UME side almost exclusively. But what do we do? Our learners asking us all kinds of questions and we don't have any answers. So I know that I'm really excited about this. Nalinda, how about for you?
Well, as an educator and a program director, I have always been committed to improving the learning environment, really trying to rethink how and why we train physicians in certain ways. Why are we doing the certain things that we do? Why are we making schedules the way that they are? And I became very interested in creating a residency curriculum and a training schedule that emphasized excellent clinical training, but not at the expense of learners' well-being or their ability to have some semblance of control over aspects of their lives and schedules. And interestingly enough, that seems to some people a little bit strange or different, but it was really, really core to what I wanted to do as a program director. And it's kind of sad to say that that had to be something that was what I was really committed to. But when I was fortunate enough to recruit a trainee with a disability into my residency program, I think the opportunities to continue to engage in this work naturally occurred and aligned with a lot of the ideas that I was already trying to implement in my own program, such as encouraging scheduling doctor's appointments, creating schedules that had time built into them for administrative time, as well as breaks from clinical responsibilities, avoiding prolonged stretches of demanding rotations, etc. And I just really wanted to create an environment that normalized the need to take breaks and ask for help. I also became much more aware of the potential for research and the huge gap in knowledge and experience for medical educators, particularly in graduate medical education. And so I felt really compelled to continue this work because of all of the potential benefits for trainees, for institutions, and for the patients that we all serve.
It's so interesting to me because when a GME program does call, you writing a case study and you now writing this guide from UME to GME, these are tangible tools that can be shared to demystify the process, but also to directly combat some of the stereotypes that are out there. I actually just today met with a group on the phone, and it was really lovely to be able to say, I can put you in touch with both a program director and a clerkship director who have done this. Would that make the process easier for you? And I think from the perspective of the leadership, that it really calms the fear that they have when they haven't gone through it before and they don't know what to do. So I'm really grateful for both of you for so many reasons, but you filled a gap. There was nothing there. I hope that you'll continue to do this work. I was not part of this work, so many of these questions are actually things that I don't know, and I'm so excited to find out. So you wrote this paper with a number of people that you had been working with. Even though it wasn't a research paper, and all research papers have little hiccups, was there any challenge or surprise that you encountered along the way?
I can honestly say that I was surprised by so many things throughout this entire process. How much I didn't know, how much I could learn throughout the entire process. But one of the best surprises that I found was how supportive and collaborative the research community was. I myself have had very little experience as a researcher, and I've really spent most of my career as a clinician and as an educator, and it was intimidating at first, but I felt incredibly lucky to have the Docs with Disabilities community access to all of the prior research and resources that had been so thoughtfully developed, and being able to connect with other members of this team through Docs with Disabilities and brought together by people like you and Zoe and bringing us all together, and how easy it was to work with that team was, I think, one of the really pleasant surprises that I found throughout this process.
I love that. And I love that it made kind of an entree to research and to, again, this isn't a research paper, it's more of a thought piece, but that entering writing in a more academic sense felt really reachable and supported. That makes my heart very happy. And Zoe?
I very much echo what Nalinda said. The entire community, particularly Nalinda, has been so supportive. And I really felt both pushed to become a better researcher and educator and communicator, but also really celebrated through this process. One of the challenges I felt, though, was the process of succinctly and compellingly communicating things that were so near and dear to my heart. I think as a disabled resident myself, there's not only my lived experience, but also the experiences of so many colleagues and friends who have shared their story with me. And these swim in my head as I do this work and remind me how important it is to communicate in a way that shows, hey, this matters. Storytelling and data really combine to help us do this, but it's such a unique experience, researching the very thing that you're living.
I was going to say, it has to be harder to be so close to the actual experience. And you just went through this. So when we talk about proximity, you literally just went through it 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago. So you lived it. And I think that must be hard. And there are probably also things that you know or that were unique to your experience. But when you're trying to write a paper for the general audience, then that gets tough. I know many of your co-authors also are people with experiences of being disabled or having a disability-related experience. How did it work to make sure that you were capturing all of the experiences? Just kind of in general, how did you work together with such a large authorship team?
Every person has such a different experience that's informed by not only what type of disability do you have? Is it invisible or visible? What other identities is it intersecting with? And what resources have you had so far in UME or connections to spaces like the community we've been referencing in Docs with Disabilities? And so we split this work up almost evenly to begin with to make sure that everyone's voices, experiences were really informing the initial writing, and then worked together to edit and respond and sort of unpack the things that had been written so that if there was something that didn't ring true for others, we had a chance to actually think about why and how can we expand this to be more representative of disability rather than an individual person and applicable to GME rather than a specific residency type or program.
That's a really good point. Obviously, some of these things will cut across all specialties, but I didn't think about the differences in program. Did you have a good representation across specialty in your author group?
So I think that was one of the strengths of our team, was having different levels of learners. We had residents, we had fellows, we had attending physicians who had disabilities, who had their own experiences through their training that could inform a lot of the content and ideas that were generated based on all of their experiences throughout sort of the continuum of going from undergraduate medical education through graduate medical education. And so I think that that was actually a strength and really highlights also the diversity of the entire disability community. So having people from different specialties and different levels of training was really, really important. And I think also, yes, highlights how big and diverse the group really is.
That's amazing. So if you think about all of these human stories, all of these people with all the different experiences across different levels, what stands out the most to you that helped inform your paper?
I think about the learners who shared their story with me and our team, and there's just so much, honestly, vulnerability and fear in this group. But there's also so much pride in disability identity and the way that disability has shaped our professional identities and our patient interactions. There's so many of us who are driven to be the best doctors we can be, and we're doing so in a system that is not set up to facilitate that. And that community fuels me to keep doing this work and advocating for medical education to shift. The learners that are actually living this experience also remind me what this shift needs to actually entail, right? It's not just a new policy or a new accommodations process or an email saying disabled learners are welcome. It is all of this, but it's also a perspective shift, a deeper understanding of what disability actually is and what it isn't. It's unlearning all this ableism that's ingrained through the medical model. And this deeper culture shift is really a must, because even if we have the best, most intentionally crafted transition process ever, it's not going to be fully accessible if it's carried out by folks who just have a misunderstanding of what disability even is, have that negative perception from the get-go.
I'm so incredibly grateful to our contributors for their willingness to share their stories, how brave they were to share their experiences, many of which informed the ideas and concepts that were discussed in our paper. While I wish that they had not had these experiences as learners, I think that their stories are so incredibly powerful and serve as further motivation for our work. I can't imagine other program directors, other trainees, colleagues, faculty hearing these stories and not feeling similarly motivated to make changes.
Wow. They were so lucky to have the two of you really spearheading how their stories then shaped and informed this guidance that you've created. I know how you care so much and you take very seriously the responsibility of moving these stories forward. So thank you. So we've talked a little bit about your paper and the stories behind the science. But this paper is something that as I said, is filling a huge gap and is very applicable in real time for not only the UME community, but also for program directors in the GME community. How do you hope that readers of your paper and now podcast listeners who will link to your paper apply your work in their practice?
I think first, I hope that it stimulates thought and an openness to different ideas and perspectives. Changing an entire culture is not something that happens overnight, but finding individuals who are open to understanding different perspectives and those who might be able to have a voice or the ability to impact small changes and be supportive figures is crucial.
Absolutely. That culture shift is slow, but if it's done intentionally, it will happen. And I hope that this specific paper also offers some concrete examples of what our next steps can be. It's hard to go from, hello, we need to change, to actually understanding some of the action steps you can take to make this happen. But this paper helps illuminate some of the moments that leadership can take steps to improve the experience of the UME to GME transition. It's such a tricky time, but the four really big areas we hear about so often are what we chose to highlight in this paper. Disclosing a disability, how do you even pick a specialty? How do you translate that into selecting a program? And once you're there, how do you actually request and utilize accommodations? Those are all moments that need particular attention and what we focused on so that learners can hopefully thrive in that transition time.
I think people will definitely be using this. I'd love to print it out for every program director so that they know, especially like, here are some checklists, things that you need to be doing. Was there a moment in your research or in your writing process where you had a shift in your own perspective on disability inclusion and medical education? It's okay if the answer is no. You're both pretty deeply ingrained in this, but I'm always amazed at the seemingly small moments that are these actually really big moments where I have a light bulb moment or I shift. And I was wondering if that happened with either of you.
I don't know that I had a full perspective shift per se, but I have some really concrete things I learned, which is that you've referenced, Lisa, that this is not a research paper in the sense that this is not a new set of information and that is new data or a new analysis, but it's information that is a combination of the previous literature and lived experience that we use to sort of distill concrete recommendations. I learned so much through the process of taking all of that important work and honing it into things that can inform concrete change. I will say the thing that kind of pushed my perspective a little bit, though, is I've had the opportunity to meet with a few program directors since this came out and discuss some of these recommendations. And what I was hearing from them was really this deep desire to have this information, right? To show up for learners and to do these things as best as they possibly can. And hearing that hunger for more information really made me, one, hopeful for the future, but two, think about how can we keep doing this type of work, right? Taking the awesome data and analysis that's happening and saying, how do we suggest as people with lived experience you use that and take it to do the thing?
And I'm going to push back just a little bit because I actually think, yes, it's not a research paper, but I think you did create new data. I think data can be a lot of things, and having people with disabilities inform this, so kind of layering on to the literature that was already there that may or may not have been as robustly disability informed, is a form of data. And certainly it is filling a much needed gap. So the average PD is not going to go out and distill from 5 or 6 reports that are densely written all of the amazing things you were able to distill into this piece.
I'm really grateful for that pushback because I think that is so true, right? And it's moments like that that sort of capture what we meant by this is a community that will keep pushing us to be better researchers and also celebrate and support us. And you're right, it is new data, but in a way that is maybe not always prioritized in the research world, but is so, so necessary for this change to happen.
Well, I learned so much through this entire process from my own experience, but also more so from listening to the stories of others. There were obviously moments where I felt uncertain or that changing others' perspectives was almost too hard and too big. And by utilizing the literature and taking these stories to create concrete actions, we took something that was really big and I think what I saw as daunting and challenging and developed something that is much more digestible, accessible to program directors and makes the concept of supporting learners in the transition that much easier. And I think it makes it hopefully much more easy for people to recognize that they can do it or be willing to try.
Thank you both for those thoughtful answers. Okay, so the reason we're doing this series, right? And honestly, this is my second interview and I'm already like, oh, I want to keep these going. I love them so much because no one gets to peek behind the curtain. You know, you're reading a paper, you don't know about the meetings that people had and what was discussed and how a study came to be. But this work, your paper, is part of a bigger effort. It's part of this supplement. How do you see your work fitting into to advancing that broader disability inclusion conversation?
I think the space that this fits in is, as we've mentioned earlier, this gap, right? There's a lot of work happening in the UME sphere, and there's a growing body of work happening in the GME sphere. But I think folks forget that there are a lot of steps to get from the UME to the GME space. And each one of those steps in the world of the learner takes so much thought and intentionality, so much research and figuring out how do I learn this about a program and what do I do in the interview and what should go into my rank list. And then when I get there, What all do I need to think about? That time alone can be so overwhelming. And what I'm hoping that this paper serves as is that bridge, right? We have to do things right in the UME and the GME, but we also have to think about what does that bridge look like to actually allow students to have that transition and to be the best doctor they can be when they have the chance to do that for the first time, to actually show up in the space. How can we get them to feel confident and supported? And like the title of the paper says, prepared to thrive.
So I think we've mentioned this before, but I think this paper is really important because it takes these ideas and concepts that are really big and it makes them feel more practical. That allows programs and institutions to have areas to focus on and giving them actual strategies to make changes to support disabled learners. It makes the process seem much less big and much less daunting. As a program director who has gone through this experience before, I wish that this existed because, right, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And once you're in it and you're building the airplane while flying it, it seems even that much more challenging. But having a paper like this that highlights the areas that you should actually focus on, I think really gives you a good plan of ideas that you can implement, and it just makes it much more realistic and accessible.
Yeah, and thank you for using that example too, both of you. It's like, yes, people are desperate for information in this space. And so making sure that it is accessible to a PD with a million things on their plate and the fear of what is going to happen. I've never had a learner with a disability. I think it just makes this paper gold. And we haven't even talked about your Disability Resource Hub UME-GME toolkit, which has been described as a monumental amount of information. Anything you could possibly want to know is in that toolkit. So it is shout out time in the evolution of a research project, in the evolution of a paper even. There are people that aren't authors on the paper or those that are authors that really helped shape the way you approach the work, really helped shape your interpretation of the work, supported you in some other way. Is there anyone behind the scenes, collaborators, mentors, students that you'd like to thank?
Everyone? No, but really, I am so grateful to have the mentors and collaborators that I do. I think first, Nalinda, of course, is the absolute best. Getting to work with her on this paper and beyond on those other projects that you've mentioned and the work that will come in the soon future was so fun. She is kind and thoughtful and brilliant and really helps me think through all the tricky moments that can come up when you're not only doing research, but also leading a team on something like this. I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing if you, Lisa, hadn't taken me under your wing. Your leadership in Docs with Disabilities, this supplement, and just across the whole research landscape is something that I can only hope to emulate. I think a lot about how this paper made me reflect on, like I said, sort of that bridge. How have I gotten from one place to the other? And as I've gone through the journey of, I might cry, of going from undergrad to my master's in med school in GME, folks like Dr. Christy Kirschner and Ray Curry and Aaron Hickey who have shown up for me time and time again. And then the team, our paper's authorship team, is all phenomenal women, many of them with disabilities. They include Molly Fasson, Ann Messman, Pilar Ortega, Jessica Ramsey, Megan Kriestman, and each of these people spend day in and day out advocating for providers and patients alike. I have learned and I will continue to learn so much from each of them.
We were so lucky to have such a wonderful team, and I absolutely want to thank all of the members of the team that were mentioned by Zoie. The idea for this paper came from a panel that we had, and I also want to acknowledge one of the members of this panel, Emily Green, whose ideas and stories also informed a lot of the ideas that were brought forth by this paper. Zoie has absolutely been a great partner in this. She has such wisdom, composure, and impeccable leadership skills. She is a force. We were so fortunate to get to work together, and I am thrilled that I get to continue to work with her on so many other projects. I'm also incredibly grateful to Docs with Disabilities and to Lisa for being the ultimate advocate, mentor, sponsor, cheerleader, and leader who many, many times helped us move things across the finish line. But most importantly, I would like to thank Wien Trong. She is my former trainee who chose to work with me, and together we started on this journey that connected me to this fantastic research and advocacy community. She changed my life and my career.
This is a question from me to you, but I'm going to answer it too, because Wien and Christy and Ray, without them, I would not have met either one of you. And it has just been so rewarding to work with you and to see all of the amazing resources that you've developed and the ideas that you have. And it's so interesting what brings us together in life, isn't it? And the two of you have some sort of magic. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely exponential when you're working together. So I'm so grateful for you both as well, and for the people who made it possible to know you. All right. If you could leave trainees, faculty, or leaders with one take-home story, or in this case, take-home advice, anything from your paper, what would it be?
My big takeaway is there are opportunities to increase accessibility at every single stage of medical education. And while it may take some creativity and it may take some grit, I promise it really is so worth it.
I want people to be open to the process of learning and improving. You will gain so much from this experience and have the potential to change so many people's careers and lives, and you will be so much better for it. I am so grateful that I have had the opportunity to work on this, and it has, again, like I said, changed my life, changed my career.
Okay, final question. Looking forward, thinking about the way in which we create research, right? We usually leave, I know I do, I leave every paper, every project with more questions, more paper ideas, more project ideas. What is your next idea? What are you looking forward to? What stories or questions do you want to uncover or ask? What are you eager to explore?
I think there's so much work being born out of UME, as there very much should be. But GME, like I said, is the first time we really get to be doctors, you know? This is the time we're shifting into a new professional responsibility and working to figure out, who do I even want to be? How do I want to step into this new identity? And because of this, there's so many unique challenges that can pop up, which also creates opportunities for us to explore more and ask new research questions. Concretely, I'm really interested in the experience of obtaining and utilizing accommodations in GME because of that tricky middle ground we live in as employees, but also still learners, and the nuance that can come with having so many different clinical spaces you may operate in as a GME learner, whether that be the OR, the outpatient setting, inpatient, the emergency room, and the list goes on. I think that's a really rich space for not only exploring and learning more about what's happening, but also thinking about how can accommodations be the tool that allows us to do our job in a way that's the most accessible for us and allows us to meet the full potential that we're bringing to this new role.
As a GME leader, I obviously gravitate towards that space and think that there are lots of opportunities to explore. We've talked about this before, that the GME community is so diverse and quite different from the UME community because of the role of different specialties and how different they really are. So I think that there's a lot to explore in this space. But I really want to know how we're doing. And is the work that we are doing now affecting change? And are we doing things that are changing the culture and improving the experiences of learners? And so that's what I really want to know. Does the work that we do matter? And does it make a change?
Well, I can tell you anecdotally that it matters. I can't tell you how many learners reach out and just cite a resource or a story on the podcast. I mean, just like I said the other day, I was able to pull from both your case study and your podcast episode to help another PD navigate uncharted territory. So it absolutely matters. Well, you are both the dream team, and I'm so grateful to you for doing this. And I know that people will be very, very excited to read your paper. It comes out next week in the hot pink supplement. Thank you both for doing this. I really appreciate it.
I just have to say, I only wish people could see like the smiles and the love in this conversation. There's something so fun about this team, and just, I don't know, the two of you and doing this work is fun too, but made particularly fun by a hot pink supplement cover.
Hot pink supplement cover talks about Taylor Swift and espresso martinis.
Yes. The legendary.
We'll
all have one together at LSL.
Espresso martini.
I don't know. Maybe the supplement needs different, like an espresso martini version. And, you have the hot pink supplement. Do it all.
Do it all. Wow. Thank you, Zoie and Nalinda. That was generous, brilliant, and exactly the kind of behind-the-scenes conversation we need right now. To recap briefly for our listeners, the paper, Preparing to Thrive, lays out 4 practical decision points: disclosure, specialty selection, program selection, and requesting and utilizing accommodations. And it gives concrete steps UME and GME teams can take to make the transition less of a black box and more of a bridge. If you want the checklist and recommendations in the paper, please go to the Academic Medicine website and download the open access paper from Zoie, Nalinda, and their team. Now, listeners, if you're a program director, an advisor, a DRP, or a trainee, please take one small action this week. Share this paper with a colleague. Add a line about disability resources to your next orientation slide deck, or invite a learner to a one-on-one conversation about specialty fit. Small, practical steps that we can all take add up to bringing together a more inclusive culture. Want more? Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future conversations from the Stories Behind the Science series. Share this podcast with a colleague who could use an actionable roadmap, or who thinks, gosh, I've never had a learner with a disability. And please send us your questions and your stories. The most useful scholarship starts from real, practical issues that people are trying to solve. Final thought. Changing the culture of medicine doesn't require perfection. It requires intention, curiosity, and steady action. Thanks again to Zoie and Nalinda for modeling all 3 tonight. Now go do one small thing that makes learning more accessible. We can't wait to hear what you did.